as soon as anybody mentions the word tribute album, it does have a tendency to have you running to the hills, and it's usually artists playing songs or singing or playing the works of others, but simply not as well. But yours is significantly different. First of all, it's an entirely different take on a classic era with Cream, because it's acoustic, and your cast list of A-list performers. And that has helped deliver a fabulous album.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much you could say about that. I mean, if we were in the West, if we were talking about the Western classical tradition, we're still recording Mozart hundreds of years later. And I think with, you know, because we're right at the beginning of popular music, rock music, this modern, and of course it's evolving and changing. And so now we're calling this particular period of the mid to late 60s classic rock. But we're very close to it. And I think that's why when you call something a tribute act, I'm not sure that that's even good, because, yeah, there's a side to that makes me cringe and want to run away forever, in fact.
But there's significant amounts of time now between these albums from the 60s to where we are now in 2023. So it's like a completely new album. It's like you're listening to something that is totally brand new.
Well, and I think it's helped by taking, we decided, let's make an acoustic album. So every single instrument on this record is an acoustic instrument. There's no electric guitar.
I was going to say we could spend 10 minutes here listing all of those involved, but you know, just a few. I mean, Joe Bonamassa, Debbie Bonham, Bernie Marsden, Maggie Bell was fabulous, Clem Clempson, Bobby Rush, Paul Rodgers. And let's just say, you know, another of the things that happens on albums like this is people do tend to dial in a performance, but again, not here. And it's testimony, I think, to the esteem that the band and the musicians of Cream are held in, that these guys came in and put in A-list performances. I mean, they were magnificent. There was, yeah, from start to finish, you know, there was something to admire, enjoy about every single track.
Yes, I think we were really lucky that everybody that came on board to make the record did exactly that. And I think we were quite careful. I mean, even the musicians that are perhaps less known in terms of being A-list names or whatever, we had just everybody, you know, a lot of the guys like Tony Remy, who were actually had played with my father. They might not be world famous names, but they're great concert musicians.
I was going to say, were you surprised when you actually sat there initially back in 2017 and you were discussing, you thought, well, okay, well, let's give him a call and him, and you got a little checklist there. Were you surprised that I would imagine pretty much everybody that you rang said, yeah, we'll do that?
Oh, not everybody. It's nice to think that everybody would, but no, I mean, me and Pete Brown had gone through a similar process the year before. We'd spent about 9 months working with Don Mackay, my agent, a bunch of different people to put together a tribute to my dad at Shepherd's Bush Empire. So we'd gone through a similar, almost, you know, it's like giving birth, and you kind of contacting Sting, and you're contacting this person, and Brian May. Sorry, I'm having my nails done, you know, or whatever it is. You kind of go through that process, you know, and you kind of end up sort of like feeling, you know, like bitter. What? My dad's not good enough for you, is he?
15 tracks you did. Were there any more recorded, or how difficult was it to actually curate that list?
I'm trying to think if there might be one or two that we ended up not being on the record. I have to get back to you on that. We did a couple of initial sessions at Jeff Allen's Sensible Music, then we ended up in Abbey Road doing the rest. So we didn't really have, we weren't kind of, you know, it wasn't the 3 weeks on the hi-hat type record budget. You know, it was like in and out, doing, you know, and especially with the caliber, as you say, with the caliber of musicians. You know, when Ginger Baker came in, for instance, And we made a record in the traditional sense of getting everyone in the room. I think Paul Rodgers was actually the only person that recorded remotely. And with somebody like Ginger, he comes in and we do 2 takes, 3 at the most.
Recording at Abbey Road as well added the last piece of the gravitas to the project, really, didn't it? I mean, you have everything in situ, and you're now putting it together at one of the iconic recording studios globally.
Yes, it does. It makes everybody want to do well because you feel that, you feel the energy in the room, and also the piano that I played on this record in particular, we used the Challen pianos. I think they have 2 of them. They're little upright pianos, but those are the pianos that you hear on all those records. I believe, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, everybody has used those pianos. It's got a very particular sound, and they're really well maintained. And then all the microphones, they have incredible microphones, which all, they even still have the stickers that say EMI on them, some of the mics. And so so the whole thing is like Abbey Road, it's like a museum stroke incredible recording studio dripping with this sense of history. So yes.
There's a degree of poignancy here as well, because we lost several musicians in the time from the recording to now. Peter, Mo, Bernie Marsden, and it was also the last work of Ginger Baker as well. So, there's a little more emotion around the project, with this poignancy hanging in the air of his last ever, certainly Ginger's last ever performance.
Yeah, Wee Ellis as well, who was been a long time resident in the UK, the kind of the sort of shaper of James Brown's band, MD.
Yes.
So it is a strange thing, isn't it? And I think but I've said this in other interviews for this project, because obviously it is a subject that comes up that, people have left us since we made this record.
You've obviously grown up around many great musicians, but how was it working on this last project with Ginger? Now, there is obviously more to his persona than what is played out in the media. I mean, if you just believed everything that you read about him in the media, then, it wouldn't be a subject that you'd want to get into or discuss. But what is the other side of him? I mean, there must be another side.
Oh, absolutely.
Or maybe there isn't.
No, there is. There's a genuinely decent, intelligent, calm, kind person. But I think for whatever reason or reasons, there was a front that was put up. He didn't suffer fools gladly, as it were. So I don't think he liked people to be sycophantic. He was somebody that had done farming and had built, roofs on houses, and he was a physical guy, and a drummer, but come from a working class background, self-made, but had been a drug addict from very, very early on, because in the same way with my father, I think there was a sort of resonance or a belief system that was built up around the jazz world, Charlie Parker, etc. There was a kind of romanticism of heroin. And, so by the time Ginger was on the music scene, he was hanging out with those people like Phil Seaman or whatever, that were that slightly older generation that had probably, I guess, he gravitated into that drug addiction very, very early on. And, we're talking about the very early, maybe even the late 50s, very early 60s, where you could be a registered heroin addict and go get your heroin on the National Health or whatever. So
it's just bizarre, isn't it, to think that those times even existed.
Well, also that drugs have been demonized. Maybe we could blame, the Reagan years in the 80s or whatever. But there are kind of, I'm not sure if that's exactly the right thing to say, but I think the idea that you're kind of choosing to take drugs, on one level it's true, on another level it's an illness, it's a mental illness, because you're not connecting to the joy and bliss spiritually within yourself that's innate, and so you're using a substance to make a connection, to take away pain. And heroin is the ultimate painkiller. It's an emotional painkiller, it's a physical painkiller, and that's why some musicians have been attracted to it, I believe, because it just takes away all of that normal life stuff, and you can just stand under the bridge, as it were, metaphorically, and practice for 14 hours a day and become a total master of an instrument, and which is what it requires. Unfortunately, whatever, it requires total dedication to mastering.
Yeah.
So there was a kind of romanticism with that, and I don't know. I mean, the damage, perhaps the impact of that kind of level of addiction very, very early on in someone's life. Do you ever even really recover from that? Because there's also, I'm not going to romanticize it myself, but I would imagine there is a lot to be gained from that kind of experience at the great sacrifice and detriment of other aspects of one's life. There can be a kind of single-mindedness that comes from that, and just some kind of insight. And I noticed that with my father too. You know, he struggled with addiction throughout his life, but never lost this level of his intelligence and his creativity and his insight and stuff. Anyway, I would imagine, in terms of Ginger's, the front of his personality, there's all of these different layers going on.
Yeah.
And I saw two sides to him. If you asked his widow, Kudzi, who's lovely, you know, I'm sure she would be able to tell you a very different side to him. That's, you know, evidenced in the photos that she has on Facebook, which are of a smiling Ginger with his lovely wife, you know, so, you know, there was certainly other stuff going on apart from the what do you want?
There isn't much, really, is there, that isn't known about the band Cream. But the one thing that some people might not know is that your mum wrote the very first song, Sleepy Time Time, which I never even, she also wrote Sweet Wine with Ginger. But, I mean, that's something, isn't it, to your mother wrote the first ever, worked on the first ever song that they put together of this, you know, this iconic band, you know. So, I mean, that was something. That was a nice story.
It's a lovely story. I mean, my mum is so camera shy in that sense. You know, and again, it's really interesting that, you know, my mum went to Camden School for Girls, and her classmates were Linda Keith and Cleo Silvestre, who Cleo released a single with the Rolling Stones as her backing band before any of them were famous. And then Cleo went on to become a very successful actress, one of the first black British actresses on our screens. Was in Crossroads, I think, you know, the long-running TV show. All kinds of things. Loads of stuff. But as a stage actress, very successful, and a singer. And then Linda Keith obviously became Keith Richards' girlfriend. And then when he went off on tour in America, she was staying in New York and walked into a club and met Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy James and the Blue Flames, I think he was called at the time. And then because she knew Chaz Chandler, she actually took Chaz to see Jimmy, and the rest is history. And then my mum wrote the first song for Cream. So there you go. But I mean, they all came from that.
It's amazing.
Thing. They were North London teenage girls that loved music, and they would go to the market and see the bands at the time, whether it was Cyril Davis or Alexis Corner or whatever, very, very early on. And so she was just around that music scene as a 16-year-old kid, kind of probably in her school uniform. And my dad was only a couple of years older, so it was just a very natural thing that she was around that whole thing. She even ran the Graham Bond fan club.
Your father, Jack, he's at number 8 on the best bass players of all time, other than Rolling Stone. Number 8. So many musicians have cited him as a major influence on their lives and careers. You know, big names, Tony Iommi, Geddy Lee, to name a few. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 92, picked up the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2006. But you still think, I think I'm right in saying, that he remains underrated. In what way do you think that there is maybe a lack of appreciation?
Well, yes, I think I did say that.
Or did I get that wrong?
No, I think, well, no, I mean, but I suppose it's it's kind of subjective, isn't it? I mean, he's my dad. He should be there. Dad, God, the Pope, Jesus. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, I suppose it's a totally subjective thing to say. It depends on who you're talking to. A lot of people go, wow, your dad's Jack Lewis. Wow, he's incredible. I love his bass playing, or I love his singing, or Cream, or I love this, or whatever. So, depending on who you talk to, he's not underrated. But I think in the bigger picture, it's just the ravages of time. I don't know. You know, maybe things move on, and we're now discussing, the auto-tune on Ed Sheeran's latest single. I don't know. I mean, it's just
I get that.
It's kind of. I suppose that's my frustration, but. I mean, Igor Stravinsky isn't mentioned that much in the mainstream press either. So it's like, maybe like my dad and Igor should get a bit of a boost because they're both underrated. But I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's sort of a stupid thing. It's a ridiculously stupid thing to say on one level. On another level, maybe it's just a little dig that I'm having at the way the media is and the way our culture is. And
finally, it's always nice to end on something amusing that makes you smile, makes me laugh, and this did. You've toured, obviously, with many great musicians, but there was one moment, one story that did stand out more than anything else, and it was the tale of a guitar icon to the masses who dressed up as a cleaning woman and came out on stage during the course of your set with a Hoover to do a bit of tidying.
Mr. Joe Satriani. Yes,
Joe Satriani.
He looked lovely as a washerwoman, actually. I thought it was maybe...
What did you think? Career. So you're there mid-set. What do you think? You turn around and you see something coming at you with a Hoover.
Well, I think.
Did you know it was him, first of all?
Of course, he's unmistakable. No, it wasn't just him. It was some of the other members of the band as well. But I think what I thought afterwards was, after speaking to some of the crew, I think apparently we got off pretty lightly, because we could have, anything might have happened. We might have been stripped naked and hoisted above the stage for the whole of Joe's set or something. I think there are some stories. I'm sure there are much worse stories than that. It was really endearing and lovely. And Joe is an amazing human being. He's just very, very genuine, lovely people, and total professionals. And yes, and he looks great as a washerwoman. So Joe, if you're listening, if it gets to that point where you want to hang up that axe, you have my full support in your new career.